After Kanye West's bizarre Super Bowl commercial promoting his clothing website Yeezy.com, the front page of the website now sells one single shirt. This, a t-shirt with a swastika. And yes, this is real. Well, YouTuber and podcaster Ruslan is here to help us break this down. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, what's up, Raj? Thanks for having me, brother.
Well, thanks for coming on, man. I don't even know where to start. What was your initial reaction?
I wasn't surprised, and here's why. This isn't the first time Kanye has done this, unfortunately. A couple years ago, he tried to redeem and repurpose the Dixie flag on his apparel. And so there was people could look this up. There was multiple videos of him up with a Dixie flag shirt on and like trying to take the Confederate imagery that's usually been associated with not so good things, right? And trying to redeem it. So this is on a whole nother level. And so I'm not surprised. I know he has an album coming out, so he's probably trying to get attention. He's not in a good place at all with his faith. And so this is actually not surprising to me.
So do you think this is just shock jock, or do you think that this is him losing his mind, or is this just pure anti-Semitism?
I think it's all the above. I think it's partly shock jock. I think we have seen him be diagnosed allegedly with bipolar. He was treated for years for bipolar with medication, and then recently has came out and said that it was actually a misdiagnosis, and now he has a diagnosis of autism. So I'm sure if someone has autism and is given bipolar medication for years or maybe even half a decade, probably not going to do great on their brain chemistry. I'm no expert in that. And then I think there's a lot of anti-Semitism that's brewing on the internet. There's a lot of conspiratorial stuff and the war in Gaza and people reacting to that and the narratives around that from both sides, the far right and the far left, in terms of how they're navigating that conversation. And so I think it's all the above. I think it's everything that you just mentioned.
You know, a lot of us are just so sad because I feel like a few years ago we were like, oh my gosh, Kanye got saved and Kanye's making this really incredible Christian music. And we're all like, this is amazing. Praise God. And then to go from that to this, and as, you know, someone who's done lots of, you know, hip hop stuff in this day, what is your thought as like to see this fall from, you know, people kind of excited to see where he was going to, you are creating a t-shirt with a swastika. How did that happen so fast?
Well, it happened gradually, unfortunately. We saw what I would say is a genuine zeal for God in the late 2018 through 2019. I saw him early 2020 in person. Last time I saw him in person at a event in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, of all places. He did a massive concert with the Sunday service group. And then what happened was right after that, there was the lockdowns that happened, which I don't think were good for him because his outlet, his community, the pastors that he was around were around him. So not just people think it's like, oh, he was close to the Joel Osteens and the celebrity. He was close to a guy named Pastor Adam Tyson, which comes from John MacArthur's Master Seminary. People can look up Pastor Adam Tyson and get a feel for who he is. This wasn't a guy that watered down the gospel. This wasn't a guy that just pacified Kanye. He challenged Kanye. And so I think what happened was the pandemic happened. Everyone's locked down. He has no community, or has less community than he's used to. He can't do his Sunday service thing. Then he gets this idea of running for president. That didn't go very well. And in the midst of that, he ends up losing his marriage. And he was really praying and believing that God would restore his marriage. He was at one point very anti-porn. He was very pro-modesty. There was a whole window of time where his wife at the time, Kim Kardashian, was like dressing different and covering up. And this was because of Kanye. And there was a time where they did an album and he told everybody they couldn't fornicate and couldn't be sexually immoral while working on his album. This is post Jesus is King. So I think what happened was, it's the death by a thousand cuts. You get isolated, you get alone. Some things in your personal life, some prayers don't get answered the way you wish they got answered, and you're not treating your mental health properly, probably because of perhaps that misdiagnosis that he had with bipolar. He really has autism. So I think it's just a whirlwind, and it's not to justify what he's doing, because what he's doing is not justifiable. But I do think it brings a bit more context in terms of what happened over the past several years.
Well, you and I have been to Israel together, and obviously, you know my heart for standing against anti-Semitism. So, where do you think the line is? Do you think it's, hey, this guy's obviously there's a lot of factors going on. Let's just kind of ignore him. He's, you know, dealing with a lie. He's kind of lost his mind. Versus, dude, this is like horrifically anti-Semitic. As someone who's like, you know, been to Auschwitz and Majdanek, and you know, it's personal for me. And so when I see someone with this kind of platform who used it on a Super Bowl commercial to draw attention to this, I don't know what to do. Like, should I for the person watching this, should they be outraged? Should they be like livid, or should it's like, okay, the more attention we give this, the worse it becomes? What should people at home do with the front page of Yeezy.com?
I would lean more towards the latter. I would lean that the more attention and the more outrage we give it, the more he wins and the more this behavior is enabled. And I know it's impossible to say, well, just ignore Ye, but Ye is one of the biggest artists in the world, right? But I really think a lot of what he's doing now is to get attention for whatever it is he has going on, drive people to his store, drive people to his music. And again, it doesn't make it excusable, but I think unfortunately we're dealing with someone that's probably in the middle of a psychotic break or has already had a psychotic break or is under severe like demonic oppression.
Mm,
And the way out of this is going to be he's either going to self-implode and it's going to get worse, or he will have to do a lot of work and perhaps go to Israel and perhaps educate himself on the history of the Holocaust and Israel as a nation and get a better grasp of the Jewish zeitgeist and why they are successful in some regards, right? And understanding the culture as you and I did when we went to Israel. When you immerse yourself, you go, oh, okay, this all makes sense. This all clicks. And yes, they do have a right to defend themselves. And yes,
mm,
they have been brutalized. And that is why they react the way they react sometimes, right? And
mm.
so I think that's the process. And I don't know if he's in the place to do that. I think he's probably going to have to hit rock bottom, and that's scary for him, who's someone that is worth $1 billion again, apparently. I don't know what this looks like, but I'm conflicted on if giving him more attention is good for him or good for the culture, because there is a certain degree of the population right now that is anti-Semitic, and they're going to champion him and buy that merch, and you might see that stuff out in public, which is just going to make it very weird and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Oh my gosh, like walking through the mall and seeing people wear this shirt, that's just going to be a hard pill to swallow. Okay, lastly, you have a massive platform, and you're obviously dealing with a lot of super important cultural issues. When you see anti-Semitism unveiled, it's exploding in Australia, it's exploding on college campuses. Yes, there are nuances to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but when you see this just okaying of anti-Semitism, frankly, how do you respond? What would you like your audience to know? How do you help people process what seems to be a re-emerging hatred of the Jewish people?
Well, I think it's a reemerging hatred and apathy in general that we're seeing in culture. If I just were to get personal with you for a minute, Raj, 2 weeks before October 7th, there was 100,000 Armenians that were displaced from Azerbaijan in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. This is the reason why me and my family came here as refugees. And I don't remember people being upset about ethnic cleansing. I don't remember anyone talking about that. And so if people are legitimately upset over the Israel-Palestine situation and they have concerns and they're coming from a biblical worldview, fine, let's talk about it. Let's have that conversation. Let's define terms. Let's see, is the IDF being held to an unrealistic standard, or are they just doing a bad job, or is it a combination of the two? Let's have that conversation. But what I don't appreciate is people who know that ethnic cleansing is happening all over the world, but for whatever reason they want to get myopic and make this the issue and the hill that they want to die on, when just less than 2 years ago, 100,000 Armenians, which I'm Armenian, got displaced from the country I was born in. And I didn't hear anything in the mainstream media. I didn't hear anything from the left or the right about this conversation. So in terms of anti-Semitism, I think it's goes back to the unfortunate human need to dehumanize, to see someone as other. And that's been happening throughout all of history. And I think it's more overt now, which makes it kind of scary. And then I also wonder how much of this, in the context of a yay, is part trolling and trying to be edgy and trying to get attention. And I just would say that's not the way you go about it, right? Now, there's also theological layers to it, where you're talking about, did the church replace Israel, or does God still have a plan for Israel? And we've discussed that at length on my channel as well. And I think that's where you really have to have pretty layered, nuanced conversation. But generally speaking, I think that the people of Israel have a right to defend themselves. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think they have a right to be in the land. And I think that how that gets navigated could get messy. I had a friend of mine on the channel who was a former IDF soldier, his family's still in the IDF, and we talked about some of the, hey, why are IDF folks why'd they take out accidentally their own civilians? Are they being sloppy? What's going on? Again, I think those are fair conversations to have. I don't think we give the government of Israel a blank check to do whatever they want to do. I don't think anyone's really advocating for that. But in that, I do think that there's a real tension that's happening, and it's all over the same strip of land that people have been fighting for thousands of years.
Hmm, hmm. Ruslan, my brother, thank you so much for coming on and helping us unpack this pretty weird piece of news, my friend.
Appreciate you, Raj. Thank you so much for having me, brother.